Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Professor Vishal.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, Gaurav. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for accepting the invitation.
No problem. Pleasure. Are you Sakshi?
Yeah, I'm Sakshi, sir.
Okay. Hello, Sakshi. Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
So what will be the format? It's 1 hour, 15 minutes. So will we have question and answers also? Or?
Yeah, I think you can speak for an hour and then maybe we can have a question answer discussions. Yeah.
Okay. I also wanted to check. I did not ask you. Is the topic in line with the, or it is too late to also ask? But is it okay, or I can talk about it?
No, I think case study is all about decision making. Finally, I mean, we present the scenario of making the decision, and I think your topic of principled pragmatism, I think it make perfectly sense because that how you make that final trade-off, and I think that is the one of the biggest toughest trade-off that one making decisions. So I think it would be very helpful and insightful. Share those insights.
Okay. Okay.
I think Sakshi, you let us know whenever we want to start. We can start accordingly.
I think we can start. It's 3:46.
Okay.
Or do we want to wait for more participants to join?
I think you as an organizer want. I think we can start
We
also
can
in the. Yeah,
we can wait for a few for some
Okay.
time. So what has been the attendance of the conference?
So we had around 15, 16. That is a constant number. And during generally during the keynote speakers or at the inaugural session, it went up to 20, 22. 34 were those people who registered with 34 for the workshop, and 16 were the full cases that were supposed to be presented here. So based on that, we are lying somewhere in between 16 to 34.
Okay.
Good evening, sir. I'm Anshuman, and hello, pleasure to meet you. I had met once before, I think, in the Atal Vajpayee Center, where you spoke on your book, sir.
Yes. Hello. So it was around the same time last year. I think it was July or some July.
Yes.
So.
So, sir, even this event is being organized by the center. Just it is named as International Summit.
Yes. So what all activities happen at the center currently?
Sir, we had a few webinars, sir, and the major event otherwise which happened was there was a winter school, sir, which was held last year. No, actually beginning of this year, sir. Beginning of this year, January.
Third week of January when we had the winter school.
Winter school, sir.
The center also is currently working with central government on Mahatma Gandhi National Fellowship program. So, which is coordinated by IIM Bangalore, and Ahmedabad is also participating there for the state of Gujarat. And the 2-year program where we would nurture the Mahatma Gandhi National Fellows who would work in each district on the Skill India program, and the role of institute would be training for the 10 days in a 4-slot 2 years certificate program, and we would help them to work with the district for improving the skill program basically. So IIM Ranchi is looking after state of Jharkhand and state of Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
All 70 fellows would be joining us shortly. Because of COVID, we have delayed the academic year. I mean, the program is running across entire India. and various IIMs are part of it, nurturing different states.
Okay. 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 Good. Good.
Also, we are participating in another program that is a Vandan Yojana, where we are helping the local Vandan Kendras made up of local tribal women who collect the minor forest products, and IIM Ranchi is helping them to convert their collection into value-added products and helping them with the marketing branding. So that is also being done under the center ages. So these both programs would be launched very soon. They're already been
working.
Sir, Vishal sir, Balkrishna this side. Sir, could you please share your screen to if at all any PPT is there?
Yes, there is a presentation. I will.
We can start.
Just sharing my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Presentation.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Yes.
The bandwidth also okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Audio, video, both okay, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Gaurav, I think we can start. It's like
yeah,
3
yeah. Yeah. So good afternoon, all the participants, and very warm welcome, Professor Vishal Gupta, on behalf of Atal Bihari Vajpayee Center for Leadership Policy and Governance. This is the last session of this 2 days international summit on management case studies, and we are very fortunate to have you with us. To give, Professor Vishal doesn't need introduction, but still to do the formality in a way. Vishal is currently Associate Professor in the Organization Behavior area at IIM Ahmedabad. He's also Chairperson of the Ashank Desai Center for Leadership and Organization Development at IIM Ahmedabad. He's well known for his teaching and research in the area of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, organization development, as well as leadership. Vishal was chosen as one of the India's 25 young HR leaders in 2013 by People Matter. He was also recognized as emerging psychologist by National Academy of Psychology in 2014. In 2016, Sir has also been conferred with the Young Scientist Award by National Academy of Sciences. And a very proud feel for all of us that Professor Vishal is currently serving as the President of the Indian Academy of Management. He also guides and is a part of board of Gujarat Gas Limited India as independent director. His research already has been published in international and national journals, and he is very known for his various workshops that he conducts on research methodology. We are very fortunate to have Professor Vishal with us, and he's going to speak on very interesting and at the same time very complex topic. The entire summit was around presenting the innovative ways in which people or organizations have dealt complex challenges of COVID, and at the base, entire case study is basically presenting the interesting dilemmas and where we need to navigate and make the decisions by understanding the underlying tricky trade-offs. And along with day-to-day pragmatic trade-off, I think even more difficult and more important trade-off or a decision that we made to make is between the paradox of principle and pragmatism. So, in our day-to-day life, we face everyday scenarios where either we have a choice to follow our ethics or we have to solve the problem in hand more effectively. And traditionally speaking, we would put them as a binary opposite, where one side you have an ethical lens to make the decision, on other side you have a pragmatic lens to make a choice by which many people would gain, or there is certain parameters on which we would have a added value to our decision. Now, interestingly, in the case study scenario, if we were in a class, we would have discussed, how to make a decision, and then will we take a side of the ethics? Would we go on the side of pragmatism? But to understand that and navigate this life ethical dilemmas, Professor Vishal Gupta is going to present us his lens of solving such dilemmas and what he termed it as a principled pragmatism. And the topic today that he would deliver his talk is navigating life ethical dilemmas through a lens of principled pragmatism. And I think it is going to be one of the very fascinating session where we might able to connect a lot many insight with what we face every day or what we may have faced solving various cases or creating the cases or creating those writing those dilemmas for our publication aspect. So I'm really looking eager forward. We have a small group of participants as of now, and in case so there's no formality. I believe we can be very informal, though we would target it like he would present his talk for like 56. Now already it's 3:45, 3:55. So maybe 50 to 55 minutes, and then we can have question answers. But since we have a very small group, if you feel at any time, I'm taking liberty, Vishal, but you can always. But I feel like if at any point of time there is a very interesting point, and in small group we can always have a very open discussion. So, Professor Vishal, up to you. And take over.
Okay, thank you, Gaurav, for the kind introduction. Thank you, IIM Ranchi and the Atal Bihari Center for Leadership, Policy and Governance for inviting me to come and talk about some of the work that I have been doing lately. So I basically started my research journey looking at leadership, and recently I have been working in the areas of mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and also started to look at ethics and the importance and the role of ethics in our lives and various issues that come when we are in various situations. So what I'm going to talk about today is a kind of a framework, is kind of a theory that I'm working on, and it's a work in progress. So I would really, as Gaurav mentioned, please let us, it's a small group, so let us make it very interactive. Wherever you would want me to stop or you would want some clarifications, do stop me and I'll be very happy to discuss it. So let me just begin by sharing the presentation that I have prepared. And as I mentioned, we're talking about principled pragmatism and navigating life's ethical dilemmas. Now, this is a case conference, and any good case, I personally believe, has to have a decision situation, right? Where the protagonist of the case study is in a situation where he or she has to make a particular decision. And those cases where you have good, basically challenging decision-making situations, those cases become interesting and engaging. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to present some case studies to you as a part of this talk, and I would let us look at those small case studies, case situations, and think about ethics and the ethical dilemmas and how do we resolve those ethics. So the first case study that I'm going to present is this, and I won't want all of you to read. So we have a friend, Tirath, who has a sick wife and who needs an expensive drug to survive. So he needs to buy this expensive drug for his wife's treatment, but he does not have money to buy this drug. So he must decide, what should he do? Should he steal the drug to save his wife, or respect the rule against theft and let her die? So here is a person who has a very sick wife. Wife needs an a drug immediately, urgently, but he is poor, he does not have the money to actually buy that drug. What should he do? Should he steal the drug or should he let his wife? Just take 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, think about it, write it down on a piece of paper if you have nearby. What would your response or your recommendation be? Now here is a person, there are two ways to look at it: steal, not steal, let wife die, or take care of them. Our lives are, most of the time, or usually, we find ourselves in situations where both paths seem equally correct. So we are, on one hand, we think about, no, Dheeraj should not steal because it is, after all, stealing. Okay, but if he does not steal, well, his wife may die. So Dheeraj should steal because he has to save his wife. What should Dheeraj do? Right? Should he steal the drug or should he not? And our life usually presents us with these dilemmas. What should we do? Which way should we go? Both ways seem equally right, or both ways seem equally wrong. So what is ethics? Right? And before we try and answer, so I would want you to keep this question in mind: what should Dheeraj do? But moving forward, let us spend some time thinking about these words, ethics. It's something that we hear so often in our society. What do we understand by ethics? Ethics is nothing but some desirable values that the society believes its people, its members should uphold. So for example, values, all of these values: honesty, fairness, responsibility, honor, integrity, etc. These are some values that the society believes. Ethics is nothing but it's a way to help us decide what is good or bad in a particular situation. So the society tells us, well, this is a particular way of doing things. This is how we should be leading. So it's a set of desirable values. And ethics gives us certain rules and principles, right? Therefore, we believe we should not steal, we should not cheat, we should not indulge in theft. So we should not be doing such things. So these are certain principles, rules that the society has given. So which we all know. These are some rules, principles that are given to us. On the other hand, there is also a word which is called as moral. So there is, when we look at ethical dilemmas, it is very important for us to think about ethics, understand the difference between ethics and morals. So when we talk about ethics, ethics refers to the rules that a social system provides us, right? So this is something that we know, as I mentioned: be honest, don't steal, don't cheat. This is what the society tells us. But then all of us, we also have morals, and there is a difference between morals and ethics, right? Morals, what are morals? Well, we all have our own principles by which we would like to live our lives. So one is ethics, which is basically given to us by the society, whereas morals is something that is given to us by ourselves. So this is how the set of rules we give, we define how we would want to live our life. For example, let me ask you a question. Do you support abortion? This is one of the most divisive issues in US politics between conservatives and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, so Democrats and Republicans. Every time US goes in for an election, they basically fight on this issue, abortion, right? On one side, you have, well, it's a life, we should not kill it. On the other side, it says, well, people should have choice to decide what should they be doing, right? Both sides are equally right, right? And you see, when we talk about this issue, for example, the issue of abortion or the ethics of abortion, here is each one of us, all of us, we may have certain ways of thinking about it. So we have our own morals, our own subjective values, whereas we also have a principle that is given to us by the society, which is the ethical principle or the ethics that the society has. And therefore, whenever you see, and there's another one which is again very, very burning topic, should humans go in for genetic testing? Should we even decode our DNAs? Should we even do genetic testing and modify our genes before we go in, or before a new baby is born? Should we go in for genetic engineering? What are the two sides? So you can think about it. We can have both ways, right? We can argue both ways. We should or we should not. Now, again, coming back to this question, what should Tirath do? Should he steal or should he not steal? So if he should not steal, right? If we say Tirath should not steal, we are essentially talking about the principles, ethical principles. Well, Tirath would be honest, Tirath would be truthful, Tirath would do what is fair because he is not encroaching on somebody else's right, because he is not taking away somebody else's medicine, and he is being driven by idealism, right? So that is a set of principles that are being upheld when we say Tirath should not steal the drug. But there could be another group of people who can also argue Tirath should go ahead and steal the drug, because if he, by doing so, if Tirath steals the drug, he is perhaps taking care of his wife, he is perhaps being merciful, he is being compassionate, he is giving his wife a chance to survive, right? So there are some principles that are being upheld in the other path also, which is Tirath should steal, right? Which is compassion, care, equality, and mercy. Now you see our life's dilemmas. Ethical dilemmas. When we say ethical dilemmas, the first thing, I think the first takeaway we can keep in mind is that whenever we talk about ethical dilemmas, they are never about right versus wrong. Ethical dilemmas are always about right versus right, or wrong versus wrong. So when we talk about Tirath's case, there is one right, which is do not steal, but there's another right, take care of wife, right? So there is a right fighting with a right, and there is a wrong. Wrong is what? Stealing, right? So the wrong is stealing, and there's another wrong, which is letting wife die, right? So whenever you see anybody who is facing an ethical dilemma, well, if it was choosing between right and wrong, our lives would have been easy. But the problem is, ethical dilemmas are about choosing between right and right. There are two rights or there are two wrongs, and we need to decide which right should we take or which wrong we should take, which is a bigger right or which is a lesser wrong. I think that is where it becomes very, very important for leaders to decide. Ethical issues are often unwelcome in the pursuit of economic success. So when you talk about profits, when you talk about economics, the other side, there is another principle. So one principle is shareholders, maximizing shareholders' value and so on. There's another principle which is actually compassion and taking care of the society and so on. So all dilemmas are essentially about how do we conduct ourselves, right? How do we essentially navigate, right? And that is the title of the talk. How do we navigate these dilemmas? Remember, it is about right versus right. So it is not that you will choose one right, the other one was wrong. You have to decide between two rights, or you have to decide between two wrongs. How do you navigate these? And these are dilemmas, these are issues that come up. So when I look at dilemmas, I have tried to classify dilemmas in four kinds. Right? There are four kinds of ethical dilemmas that we face in our lives, or leaders face in organizations. The first dilemma is what I call as truth versus loyalty. Right? So what is truth versus loyalty? The first dilemma talks about being truthful, saying what is right, versus being loyal to a particular group. Right? So you want to be loyal, you belong to, so let's say some of us belong to, I belong to IIM Ahmedabad, some of you, Gaurav, Sakshi, you belong to Anshuman, you belong to IIM Ranchi. So we belong to a particular group. So there is a loyalty towards that particular group. So what should we do? Should we be loyal to a particular group, or should we be truthful? So that's the first dilemma. Both are right? We can also think about it as being authentic versus being polite, right? So not saying, one is authentic, saying the truth, the other is being polite and not telling the. The second dilemma is justice versus mercy. Should you be fair, or should you actually be compassionate and have mercy on people and give them another chance, right? So justice is giving what is due, whereas mercy is, well, let's be equal, let's give them another chance, let us give them more chances and see whether they would come up. Or the third is self versus community. Are we working for our own purpose, or are we working for the benefit of others? And who are those important others for whom we are working? So competition, that is thinking about just myself at the cost of others, or collaboration, basically thinking about me as a part of a bigger whole and thinking about the well-being of that bigger group, that larger community. And the last one is short-term versus long-term. Should I be right today, or should I be right in the longer term? I think that is again a very, very big issue. What should I be doing today, which is being idealistic today, or being realistic, maybe violating, or maybe not being right in the short term, but working towards the long term goal. So what should we think about? Should we think about short term versus the long term? So these are some of the dilemmas that come up when we are thinking about our lives, our issues, and so on. So I've just defined these. Truth versus loyalty, deciding between what I love and respect and what is truth. Justice versus mercy, deciding between giving others what they deserve and giving them another chance. Self, deciding between what is good for smaller group, me or the smaller group, and the larger group. And short term, what is good right now and what might be good in the future. And again, there are no right answers here. This is right versus right. Okay, these are issues. These are what we call as difficult problems to solve in business and in our lives. So again, as leaders have a very important role, and ethics become really critical for leaders, because as leaders, we have to think about what is it, how do we navigate these dilemmas, what is it that we should be doing? Because in any decision making, some of these ethical issues would be implicitly involved. So let me take you, so let us keep Tirath in mind, okay? We have not given our answer yet, right? So we are divided, should Tirath steal or should Tirath not steal, right? So there are both camps here. What should we be doing? But I pose before you another case. I give you another situation to read and think about. Maybe pick up your pen, piece of paper, read it, read the short case study, and you've got to write it down, and we'll discuss it as we go forward. What should we recommend, right? Arun Kapoor is a product manager, okay, at an online travel agency, has to decide whether to pursue a potentially lucrative but controversial idea. An internal team proposed revising the online pricing algorithm to use cookies from customers' web browsers in order to customize flight and hotel pricing. Because a customer's level of disposable income can be easily inferred from his or her online habits, a travel agency could then use this information to charge anywhere between 10 to 130% more for a flight or a hotel. Given the high volatility in flight and hotel prices, it is almost impossible for customers to trace these price increases back to the booking agency. So you're getting the issue. We are using some confidential information without telling the customers, okay? And that information can actually be used to jack up the flight and hotel prices, and the customers will not come to know about it. And Arun is the leader. You are the leader. You are Arun, all of you, okay? Now the issue is you want to increase the revenue of the company and increase your bonus. But he is also concerned about the fairness of this practice and about violating customer privacy. So on one side, it is profit, it is economics, okay? It is loyalty to the share value, shareholders, right? And so on. On the other hand, there is also the issue of privacy of customers and using their private information to do this. But remember, the customers, there is 100% surety that the customers will not come to know about this. Okay, you do it or you don't do it, customers are not getting to know that there is some such thing that can be done. So it is absolutely okay, even if you were to do it, nobody will come to. Now you have to decide. Now you see, what are the dilemmas? As I mentioned, the first dilemma is truth versus loyalty. Should I do what is right? But I will not earn so much, versus loyalty, right? Loyalty, I may earn more profit for the company. Share prices may go up, shareholder value may go up, and so on. Self versus community, thinking about myself versus thinking about community, society, customers, right? And their privacy and their norms. And the third is it right in the short term versus long term? What should I do? Should I be idealistic now, or should I be realistic and work towards increasing profit, because nobody is going to come to know, right? Right. So these are some dilemmas, and we've got to think about it and see what is it that can be, right? Now, what I'm going to propose, and this is the framework that I want to come to, and I call this as I mentioned, the framework that I'm working on to deal with these dilemmas is what I called as the framework of principled pragmatism. When we have these dilemmas, what is it that we can do to think about how do we navigate these issues, right? So it has basically a foundation which I call as ethical purpose. Okay? The foundation of this framework is built on ethical purpose. And then there are 4 pillars to understand how we can be principally pragmatic. So the first pillar is ethical principles, and I'll talk about it. The second is about our own morals, character. The third is about being pragmatic in the situation, and we'll talk about how do we become pragmatic, what is it that we can do, how do we make those choices, and the last is awareness of the outcomes for our own selves when we exercise this path of principled Okay, so I'm just going to take you through each one of these as we. Now the foundation, right? When we look at Tira or we look at Arun, if we have to decide how do we resolve these dilemmas, the first foundation or the first thing that we've got to think about is what is our purpose? What is it that we want to do? This is basically the ends that we are working towards, right? So we've got to be very clear about the ends. And we've got to ask two questions to ourselves, two questions to our own selves. First, am I working for myself, my own benefit, or am I working for the benefit of the society, of the community to which I belong, right? So it is the doing good for others or doing good for myself. That's the first thing. And whether I want to achieve the good in the long term, or am I being short-sighted and I'm thinking only about the short term? So it should be essentially what we are trying to do is thinking about the community and the long term is what would be an ethical purpose. So this defines this foundation or this path or this part of the framework talks about the purpose and betterment of others or the society in the long term is the purpose to be upheld. So when we exercise or when we are going to talk about principled pragmatism, okay, how do we exercise pragmatism? The first thing that we should be very careful is at the end of the day, what is it that you are trying to do? If you exercise pragmatism, but you essentially are trying to do good for your own purpose, your own self, then that is something that is not warranted. Then that is something that is not called for. When we are talking about pragmatism, we should be clear that this pragmatism is being talked about for the benefit of others. So that's the first thing. The second is when we resolve ethical dilemmas or when we have to think about resolution of these dilemmas, we should exercise or use principles to the extent possible, right? And what are principles? Principles define the means that we want to achieve, right? So means that we will use to achieve the end. So we have defined our purpose and we have our means. And what are these means? These means should be built on the core principles that the society teaches us. Okay. So what are the core principles I have talked? I would like to mention 4 core principles. If you look at any society or any religion also for that matter, talks about 4 basic principles: being truthful, being honest, and honest means basically a man or a woman of integrity and being transparent in your dealings, being compassionate towards others, and being fair, right? So being merit, being working based on merit, being fair to people, compassionate, honesty, and truthfulness. So when we are resolving our dilemmas, when we are in certain complex situations, first of all, think about your purpose. What is it that you want to achieve? Are you working for your own self or are you working for others? The second is, what are the principles that you are following? Are you working on the basis of these 4 principles or no? Okay, and following these principles is an easier and quick way to address dilemmas, because this is what society tells you. Well, we should do this in a particular situation. So this is something that is already there for you. So go ahead, follow these principles. This is what society is telling us and resolve those dilemmas. But the problem is there are many situations. There are many situations where the principles fail, or where the principles actually clash with each other. There are principles that are in conflict with each other. Let me give you the third, and this is the last case study that last case-led that I want to give you. Read it and again write a response on your notebook. Okay. Imagine that you are walking on a road and you see a girl being chased by a group of boys. The girl is frightened and hides behind a wall and requests you not to tell the group of boys where she is hiding. Sorry, there is a typo. Where she is hiding. Right? So you have seen the girl hiding somewhere. Okay? And she requests you not to tell the boys where she is hiding. The boys approach you and ask you if you have seen the girl. What would you do now? Will you reveal the location of the girl or will you tell a lie? Okay, so we were talking about Tirath. We said Tirath should steal or Tirath should not steal. Now here is a case, you know where the girl is hiding. The boys come and ask you, where is the girl? Will you tell a truth? Because the ethical principle says be truthful, be honest. Okay? Will you tell a lie or will you not tell a lie and reveal the location of the girl? Now both are, remember, ethical dilemmas are about two rights. It is not about right versus wrong. Okay? There are two principles now that are clashing. Right? We said, when I was talking about ethical principles, I was telling you that, well, ethical principle, well, we all know. Society tells us, lead our lives, be truthful, honest, compassionate, be fair. But very soon, a lot of times, ethical principles fail because either there are two principles clashing with each other, or the principle clashes with your own moral, So your own moral would be, I want to be compassionate, I want to take care of the girl, I do not want to reveal the location. But the principle states that you must not tell a lie, you must be truthful. Or we can also think about it in this way, that there are two principles. One principle is being honest, being truthful. The other principle is being compassionate. Okay, so that is also a principle of our religions, of our society, be compassionate. Okay, so do not sort of harm others and do not think about harming others and so on. So there are two principles that are clashing and you have to decide which one is that you will choose. So it comes, and therefore we need, ethical principles are not enough when we resolve dilemmas. Okay, ethical principles are not enough. They are just some prescriptions. They are some normative prescriptions of the society. They tell us how we should live. But a lot of times we cannot just go by the principles because they are not enough in informing us what should we do. And therefore, we come to the second pillar, which is about our own values and morals. What are the values that we hold dear? Out of all these, when you have conflicting principles or when you have conflicting values, what will be those values that you will hold dear? What would be those values that you would like to be upheld when you will have dilemmas? What are the values? So it is very important that we really understand what are some of the things that drive us. What do I give more credence to truth, speaking the truth, or do I give more credence to actually being compassionate, right? Relationships that we care about and our own emotional sensitivity, right? So our own individuality, right? And that is what we bring in to that ethical dilemma, to that decision-making situation, and we need to understand what is it that we hold dear. How will we like to see ourselves? Okay, what are some of the things that we would like to talk about? We would like to be seen doing when we are working in these complex situations. So my prescription here and my hypothesis here is that morals should be aligned for a happy society. Morals should be aligned to ethical principles as much as possible, right? All the principles that we know of, but whenever there is a sort of conflict between principles, you should choose those morals, or we should choose those morals that help us achieve ethical outcomes. Okay? Ethical outcomes for the community in the long run. Even if, so basically what I'm trying to say here is that when you have conflict of principles, when there is a principles fail to tell you what should you do in a particular situation, you should choose those morals that will help you achieve ethical outcomes for the society at large, for the community at large in the long run, right? So that is something we should work towards, actually achieving good and better outcomes, not for ourselves, but actually for the larger society, for the others in over a period of time. And those should be the morals that we should give more credence to. And I'll come to how do we actually use to resolve these dilemmas that I've been talking about. Now, having an understanding of principles and then our own morals, our own values, then comes the third thing, which is pragmatism. And what is pragmatism? Well, this is the definition. This is how we define a pragmatic individual is a person who deals with things sensibly and realistically, that is based on practical rather than theoretical considerations, right? So being practical is what is pragmatic. That means letting go. What is the practical aspect? The practical aspect is letting go of some principles in order to achieve the outcomes. That is what is meant by being pragmatic. So when I say being pragmatic, what I'm essentially trying to say is doing things that have practical consequences in people's lives. Okay, so you got to choose a path which is between principles, okay, and you need to let go of certain principles in order to actually achieve a particular outcome that you hold dear. Because if you were to follow certain principles, those principles may not help you achieve the outcomes that you do. So pragmatism essentially acts in two ways that I can suggest here. The first is choosing the principles that are important, choosing the principles as well as morals that are important. And then the second is having that courage to actually let go of those principles and using them in the time. So assigning more weight to outcomes in times of dilemmas. So essentially what is it that we are trying to say here is, when you have principles in conflict, choose those principles that will help you achieve that particular outcome, that ethical purpose, ethical outcome, benefit for others in the long run. That is something that you should choose, and let go of those principles that may actually not help you in achievement of those particular outcomes that you have decided. And the second is have that courage, have that moral courage. So you should be clear as to why you are doing this, right? Your own courage, moral courage, your personal courage to go against few ethical principles that you believe are contradictory to achievement of that purpose. So I should be okay to tell a lie if needed, because even though I'm violating a principle, I'm violating the principle of telling the truth, but I need to have that clarity as to why and when it is okay to tell a lie. So first is understanding that there are principles in conflict with my outcomes, and therefore I will let go of certain principles in order to achieve those outcomes, and that is called as pragmatism. And the last part of principled pragmatism is, my friends, please understand that following the path of principled pragmatism has consequences for self, has significant consequences for self. Because the moment you violate certain ethical principles, you yourself lose the moral high ground. You lose the moral high ground because you have violated some principles. You have now told a lie. You have now maybe indulged in theft. Maybe now you have indulged in trickery. Okay, so you have now lost the moral high ground because you have violated the principle. You will be loved by many, but you will also be hated by many. Because some people will come back to you and say that Vishal Gupta also speaks lies. He does not speak truth. He is also a liar. So be ready that the moment you violate certain principles of the society, there will be some people who will definitely question your character. There will be some critics that will say that you also violate principles. You don't have the moral high ground. But how do you cope with it? Again, this is my prescription. Self-belief and being in touch with core purpose helps. Okay. So again, what we mentioned, that clarity of the core purpose and self-belief as to why, what are you trying to achieve, and your purpose is lofty, your purpose is big, and therefore it is okay to be criticized by some. It is okay to be questioned, because anyways you have violated the principles. So people will always say that you have violated the principles, but why I violated the principle? It was for certain ethical outcomes that I wanted to achieve, right? So that is the fourth thing that we should remember in the idea of principled pragmatism. So let me give you the fourth caselet. The fourth caselet, and this is a study that comes from our mythology. This is Krishna, the story of Krishna, and this cartoon on the screen is basically this photo is depicting the war scene, just before the war of Mahabharata. Arjun is, with his hands folded, is praying to Krishna, and Krishna is giving him the sermon of Gita. Now, people who are familiar with the story of Mahabharata, but let me just for the benefit of people who may not be familiar, well, this was a war fought between two, we can say, group of brothers. One was the Pandavas, the other were the Kauravas. Pandavas were people who were idealizing or maybe representing the good, and the Kauravas were representing the bad, the deceit, the trickery, right, and the bad things. Now Krishna was fighting on the side of Pandavas, and this war the Pandavas and Krishna were on one side, and Kauravas were having a huge army, and they had great warriors on their side. So when this war is fought, Krishna, who was actually the godhead, he was basically revered as a god, he indulged in trickery, in deceit to win the war. Okay, so he got a lot of warriors on the side of Kauravas killed by deceit and trickery. So he violated a lot of principles of honesty, integrity, truthfulness during the war in order to win the war for Pandavas. He did not pick up arms. He was the advisor and the strategist for Pandavas. Now, one of the biggest dilemmas of this epic continues to remain is Krishna indulged in deceit and trickery. Right? And this war was not won fair. Had the war been fought fairly, there was no way Pandavas could have defeated Kauravas. But he violated the principles that were there, and he followed what I write here as the pragmatic middle path. Now, in order to understand this case from the lens of principled pragmatism, this is how I would like to sort of help understand the act of Krishna during the war. The first is the foundation, which was ethical principle, and he declares, this is a very, very popular saying where he declares that whenever there is bad in the world, I will come and I will fight against the bad. So my purpose is to actually establish the good on the earth for the society, right? So the purpose for which I come to the earth again and again is to actually eliminate the bad and fight and uphold the good, which is the purpose. And this is not for me, but this is for the community. This is not for myself. It is for the masses at large. This is for everybody. This is creating a society which is living up the principles of good. Ethical principles, well, he followed ethical principles to the extent possible. War in the story of Mahabharata was the last resort. Okay? Pandavas and Krishna made all their efforts to actually plead with the Kauravas that they should be given what was due to them. They underwent exile, torture, sacrifices for a long period, 13, 14 years, multiple times, but they kept on treading the path of truth to the extent possible. So he followed. He declared, Krishna declares in the epic that, well, this was the last resort. War is the last resort, and we have made all attempts to actually try and convince the Kauravas to give what is due to the Pandavas, right? So this is following ethical principles to the extent possible, right? Being truthful, being honest, being compassionate, being fair to the extent possible. But when principles do not help, when principles fail, when principles do not help you achieve your purpose, okay, that is where you've got to think about what is the character, values that I would like to uphold. So on one hand, you can uphold the principle or you can uphold the purpose. And when we talk about values, we just discussed, we are talking about morals should be aligned to ethical principles as much as possible, but morals should eventually be aligned to the purpose that we want to achieve, and the purpose is fairness and compassion, which he wants to establish, and therefore he uses pragmatism and he violates many principles during the war. There are many principles that are violated during the war because he decides or that the principles do not help achieve the outcomes. So that is, in the long run, the benefit of the community is more important than upholding the principles in the short run. Okay, but sacrificing the purpose, therefore, in the long run. So he ends up violating the principles in the war that he preached all his life. All those principles were violated during the war. And the last is, remember, when you are violating the principles, you will always be questioned and criticized. When the war ends, Krishna is cursed that he and his entire Yadav kingdom would be wiped off from the earth 36 years from the war. So Gandhari, who was the mother of Kauravas, she cursed Krishna that in 36 years, after 36 years, you and the entire clan will be wiped off from the earth, and you will die a very, very not so good death because of the trickery and the deceit that you have committed. So basically, you will be always questioned because there are some principles that have been violated, but then some principles may not help you achieve those. And this is the kind of idea that we need to sort of look at when we're talking about principled pragmatism and how do we resolve our lives ethical dilemmas. So let us come to the three cases now. Okay, you must be wondering, I have given so much of lecture, but what do we do about these cases that we talk about? So the first one is Tirath, who has a sick wife and needs an expensive drug. What should he do? Should he steal or not steal? And how do I apply the framework of principled pragmatism to this, to helping resolve this dilemma? So the first thing, as I mentioned, let us think about the purpose. Let us think about the purpose towards which Tirath is working. The purpose is it self or is it community? To me, as I see, the purpose is self. He is basically not working for the benefit of the larger group or the society. He is actually being selfish in this, and he's thinking about his own good and benefit. He's thinking about his own condition, his wife. So the purpose is actually, in that sense, not what we defined as the ethical outcome. When the purpose is not ethical, when the purpose is not, when you are talking about, in the sense, the characteristic of the ethical purpose was, we said you should be thinking about, when we are talking about principled pragmatism, it should be directed towards benefit of the larger group. That is not the case here. And if that is not the case, principles should not be violated. Principles can only be violated when the purpose is large, when you're looking at benefit of others in the norm. Character and relationships, well, he does uphold certain characteristics, which is compassion, but that is again directed towards self, not towards the larger purpose that we were talking about, the ethical purpose. And therefore, Tirath should not steal. Tirath should not steal. He should not be indulged in stealing. Rather, he should look for certain other alternatives in this particular situation. Maybe beg, maybe try to convince the pharmacist, maybe borrow money, maybe try and do something else, but not indulge in speed. That is something that is not warranted. The second case of Arun Kapoor. Okay, this is again, it is not for others, and therefore principles should not be violated. Okay, and the values of all these values that are in line with the principles must be upheld, which is honesty, truthfulness, fairness, and he must try alternatives, right? So you must think about alternatives that can be actually, that can help you resolve this particular dilemma. And in this case, he can actually, so you see a lot of browsers ask you to allow using the cookies for when you are browsing their site. So they ask you to accept certain terms and conditions, right? So that is an alternative that can be tested, tried, rather than actually by default using the cookies to actually without even taking permission from the customers. And the last one, when you see a girl being chased, will you tell lie or not? What is the purpose? The purpose here is somebody else's well-being. It is not your own well-being, but it is about another person, right? And this purpose is therefore not directed towards self, it is directed towards others. And therefore, violation of those principles that come in line with the achievement of that purpose can be violated. And therefore, the principle of not telling a lie, of being truthful, can be violated. You are driven by your own value, which is compassion, but that is again in alignment with the purpose, which is of others well. And therefore, you need to be pragmatic. You need to have that long-term thought and not be short-term and say, no, I will not let go of the principle. The context demands violation of the principle, which is not telling a. And therefore, be ready that people can, now you have lost the moral ground. You are no more Harish Chandra now. Okay, you are no more that person who does not tell a lie anytime. Okay, so you have, now people can still hold you guilty of violating principle, and they can say, well, you also tell a lie, right? So don't tell us that you don't tell a lie. You also tell a lie. In certain situations, you have told a. So you have lost that moral high ground, but it is okay. As I mentioned, having that clarity of your own purpose and the courage to uphold it will help you in tiding over those criticism and maintaining your well-being. So the last thing, when we talk about principled pragmatism, it is a middle path. Okay? It is having that judgment to decide when is it that you should exercise pragmatism, when is it that you should let go of certain principles. So I would say it should be the last resort. Don't use it as an easy way out of dilemmas. Okay, try to work with principles as much as possible, but when you are sure that the principles will not help you resolve your dilemma and they are counter to your purpose, it is okay to let go of those principles. Must be used rarely and in exceptional circumstances. And remember, we always say means are as important as ends. Means do justify the ends. Means are important most of the times, but they may not be always. So we as leaders, when we talk about ethical dilemmas and ethical issues, we may need to exercise that judgment. When is it that some means may need to be violated in order to achieve the that we are? Right, so this is, yeah, this is a book that we have worked on, and this is going to come out. It is already listed on Amazon now, but it's going to be released on 18th of July. And this is, so we have looked at some characters from Mahabharata. Krishna, what I presented, is one of the stories that we have written in this book, and we are sort of presenting these ideas. This is, as I mentioned, it's a work in progress. I'm working on it. The preliminary ideas is what. Thank you very much. I will stop here and take some questions, feedback, comments, suggestions. What you
Thank you, Vishal. I think it was amazing lecture. I mean, till the point you had not mentioned Krishna, I think your entire narration or the model was perfectly able to help me visualize Krishna. I mean, honestly, I will all the example. I mean, that entire structure was so that it was a Krishna was in my mind, and then you presented the Krishna slide. It was very beautiful, and I think most of us staying in India always have heard the stories of Rama and Krishna, and we always compare who is a better in decision making. Should we go for a principle based approach? Should we be more pragmatic? I mean, that we have always heard, but it was presented very beautifully, and I really like the point that ethical purpose come about ethical principles. I mean, that is very beautifully put forward, and hence when there is a conflict between the principles, purpose is at core, and at that time to adhere to the purpose, we may have to be pragmatic, and it puts so much beautiful value on the word pragmatism, because I mean, always, in day-to-day layman language, the word pragmatism is something that puts selfish interest above, ideas. But in this case, the pragmatism is not about selfish interest, but about ethical purpose, putting above ethical principles when the things are in conflict. And that was absolutely beautifully put forward in your model. And lastly, I think the idea that when you do this pragmatic choice to adhere the ethical purpose above ethical principles, you would have consequences on your self-image or whatever the identity, and hence the will or the fuel for able to do a pragmatic decision making in such dilemmas is moral courage. And I think, and I mean, rather pragmatism is not easy. I mean, it is more tougher. I mean, to be Krishna is more tougher than probably to be Rama. I mean, I'm simplifying, but yeah, I mean, at a level, it's very difficult choice that we have to make at that point. So I really, yeah, the forum is open. I just thought that I would conclude what maybe we got from your session, and then probably we can open up the question and answers.
Absolutely. Can I have a comment?
Yes. Please.
Talked about principled pragmatism. I just have a corollary to this.
Yes.
Now, in any leader and decision, there will be multiple spheres of executive responsibilities.
Yes.
And not necessarily one sphere of responsibility is more important, the other sphere of responsibility less important. If that is the reality for leaders in decision making, how does one go about in actually looking at principles, looking at long-term, short-term, looking at consequences?
Yeah, so, okay. So if I understand your question correctly, you are asking how does one, so I would say that this kind of exercise has to be done at every level. It is not just one person's. I think this is a philosophy of living that has to be ingrained at multiple levels. So if you are talking about a leader and you have multiple people, right, who are reporting to you when you are doing your implementation of the task that you mentioned, right? So you must be aware that as a leader, right? What are the roles and responsibilities? That is the first thing. You must be clear what is it that we want to achieve. Now, for each one of these people, there should be a clarity of the goal, of the purpose. And the purpose is what we mentioned, the foundation. It is the ethical, the purpose that we are all working for. And if for any one of these, subordinates or for juniors, you have your own self, which is against the goal of the organization, right? Then you are violating that foundation of the ethical purpose. So the first thing is, as a leader, I would like to emphasize that this is a mindset that has to be ingrained. This way of thinking has to be ingrained at multiple levels, that we should give the first credence. We should ask, what is the purpose? What is the goal we are working? And then what are the principles that we are upholding? What are the principles that we are violating? Why are we violating those principles? And so pragmatism will help you answer whether your violation of the principles is right or not in that particular context, right? So it has to be at multiple levels for all people, and it has to be a way of looking at the decisions that you would be making.
Vishal, I just felt I also had one doubt which relate with the question that was asked. I mean, at the core of ethical purpose is your what you propose as the loci of others and loci of long term. Now,
Yes.
most of the cases, I think that is a choice that become very, very difficult. I mean, to be very honest, for me, when you presented three caselet, the case 2 and case 3, the choices were relatively easy because the definition of self, I mean, that was very clear. In case 1, what the earlier question was, I mean, saving somebody's life, would I consider it as a selfish, self-centered act, or would I consider it as a other center act? I had a bit maybe a different point of view. Like similarly, right? I mean, currently so vaccine we face this issue, right? Most of the countries should they hold the vaccines for their own countrymen, or they should give it to the other countries who are facing more tougher issues right now. Now this question is the self boundaries are so difficult.
Yes, agree. So even the self and even the other boundaries is very, very fuzzy, right? So see, it happens, and I don't have a very clear answer to it, but what I think about this question is that you see, it all happens in a hierarchy. It happens in a hierarchy. So the first thing is you've got to uphold. See, if you are stealing for your wife. So essentially, it is something that can be attributed to your own interest, right? There is, yeah. So we can question. We can sort of question whether.
No, I agree. I mean, I rather agree your logic, because I also was loud thinking that somebody is immediately dying, but like normal stealing, many a times people give the reason that they do it for earning for their life. I mean, it's in a way same logic. So you're right in the sense that it is a finally a selfish act.
Because if you are doing it for a selfish act, then you are actually breaking the tenet of the society, which is compassion for others, right? Now, that is, so it happens in a sort of hierarchical way, right? We should think about our world, right? But our primary responsibility is for our country. So in terms of vaccination that you mentioned, right, the primary is to take care of our immediate society, right? Which is so your own. See, that is why we should all have our own morals aligned with the ethical principles of the society as much as possible, as well as outcomes, right? So if it is a question of life and death, it's a little complex problem. But for leaders, you see, if you're thinking about doing something for your own organization at the benefit, at the cost of the society, is that warranted? Is that because now your own organization is also a selfish interest, and you are doing something which is counter to the benefit of the society. So you are not treating your wastewater, but the wastewater coming out of your company and putting it in the river. Doing something at the cost of the society. So you have your self-interest going against the interest of the community. Right? And that will not be an ethical purpose. That will be a selfish interest. That will be a selfish interest. Right? And that is the idea of defining this purpose as the foundation and trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There is one more question we have.
Yes.
Shikta ma'am, do you have?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. In fact, a nice presentation. So yeah, indeed, I just want to add on to that. That is what we diverge the parity optimality index in terms of gaining at the cost of making someone worse off. Sir, as far as this principled pragmatism is concerned, you point out that the principle should not be violated. But at many cases, that is what violation comes into the act. And we tend to, you have also mentioned about coming up with different alternatives. So is it necessary that out of all the alternatives, we have to jot out to a single alternative to make it more prominent in terms of decision making? Is it essential?
No, eventually you will have to do something, right? You will have to take a course of action. So out of all the alternatives, you will have to decide which one is the alternative that does not violate the principle and helps you achieve the outcome, right? So you may have a lot of alternatives, but at the end of the day, you will have to decide and choose one or a combination of few, but eventually it has to be something that you will do, right? So and I did not also say that you don't have to violate principles. I actually said throughout my presentation that there will be times when certain principles will need to be violated, because principles may run contrary to your achievement of the outcome or the purpose. But you should ensure that the purpose is correct. That is your primary responsibility. That is the first thing that leaders have to decide. What is the purpose? Are our purpose ethical? And then, in order to achieve that, we should follow the principles as much as possible. But in case it is not possible, it may be okay to be pragmatic and go by your own morals rather than the principles set by the society. But that should not be the easy way out. It should be the last resort after you have. And in order to do that, well, you should have your alternatives and you should explore, weigh your alternatives, and then take the best one that fits in this particular situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishal. I think we have already crossed the time. It was a very, very helpful and insightful session. And I think at the end of discussing dilemmas for last 2 days in terms of presenting your case studies, I think the framework presented by Professor Vishal is going to be very, very helpful to take it as a learning from this summit. We would now like to present you virtual, I can say, expression of gratitude to you by presenting you a virtual token from our side. I would request Anshuman and Sakshi to present token to.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we once again express our gratitude for your enlightening talk. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Gaurav. So this is the last part. I'll be delivering the vote of thanks. Thank to all of you, first of all, for being here. Respected Sir, respected Gaurav, honorable faculty, participants, good evening to all of you. As all good thing comes to an end, so is this summit. I deem it as a great honor to propose a vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this summit such a resounding success. On behalf of IIM Ranchi and the Atal Bihari Vajpayee Center for Leadership Policy and Governance, I would like to propose a hearty thanks to our director, Sir, Professor Salim Singh. It was his constant support and encouragement that this summit took place. And though he is not here, but we do present a hearty thankfulness to him for allowing us to do this summit. The summit was about COVID-19, and who could better have explained the entire situation than the medical practitioner himself. And for this, our chief guest, Dr. Chandrakant Laharia, he was there and he explained everything, how the vaccination policies are having, how the COVID-19 waves are going to happen, how many waves we may face it in the future, what has to be done, wearing masks, sanitizers, proper people behaviors are the ways we can fight against this COVID-19. I must here thank Professor Sanjeev Parasar, IIM Raipur, Professor Sandeep Puri, Asian Institute of Management, Philippines, and Professor Vishal Gupta, IIM Ahmedabad, who took their time out for the session and highlighted the importance of writing the cases and emphasized the importance of case study in research and teaching. Thank you so much, sir, for giving out us time and making our session such a wonderful and such an insightful one. The workshop on case method was very educative, and this was only possible because 3 of the most distinguished faculties agreed to take the lead. Thereby, I must thank to Professor Rohit Kumar, IIM Ranchi, Professor Satyajit Mujumdar, TIS Mumbai, and Professor Amrendu Nandi, IIM Ranchi, for taking out their precious time and making the entire session interesting, interactive, as well as knowledge enriching. Few participants were so thrilled after the workshop that they appreciated the initiative and got motivated to explore and develop the case study further. I would also like to thank the members of the advisory board for their valuable suggestions and presence always. I must thank the reviewers who reviewed all 54 abstracts and then 24 full cases. A special thanks to the session chairs and definitely the moderators, the students and the faculty who were moderating it. I also thank the co-chairs of Atal Bihari Vajpayee Center, Professor Marathe and Professor Mishra, who were like 2 pillars for entire this summit. So thank you so much for making this all happen and supporting always whenever you were needed. I must thank Professor Hazarika, who was always there as a constant support. And he was like always 24/7 ready to help me. So thank you so much. A heartfelt thank to the organizing committee and especially Ms. Prachi Chitlanga, the IT department, the teaching and non-teaching staff for their unflinching support and coordination. I must say here, we have a complete lockdown in Jharkhand today. And in spite of those, that the staff took a pledge to come here so that the event run in an uninterrupted form. Thank you so much, the IT people. Thank you so much, the IIM Ranchi fraternity, staff and everyone. A special thanks to a student of IIM Ranchi for active participation. I thank you all, the students, for showing their interest in the program. A small request to the participant, may you please email us your feedback about the summit by replying it to ICMC email ID. It will be helping us to plan the future summit in this regard. Thank you all. Take care, stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really?
Yes. Leave meeting.
Good work, Sakshi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.